why do I always have to extend the olive branch?
Yeah.
She's like, bro, like, look at us. Like, look around. Like, don't act like you just got here. Like, and it was kind of like a dose of reality for a second. Like, bro, like, if you were just in this, like, a year, I would be giving you a different speech. But we've been in this for a long time. We've been in these spaces for a long time. You know very well why it is that you have to keep extending this olive branch.
Mi gente, dímelo, dímelo. Welcome to another episode of the Quién, Eres podcast, brought to you by Plural. You already know it's your boy Pavel bringing you another very special episode with another very special guest. Before getting into this week's guest, let me give you a quick reminder on what this show is all about. You see, the mission of this podcast is to redefine professionalism. We've been trained to believe that who we are authentically is unprofessional, and I'm here to tell you that it is not true. Each week, we have a different guest join us for a very candid conversation around the conflict that they have experienced between professionalism and authenticity. Before getting into the full conversation, let me give you a quick bio on who Jeff is, so you have some more context going into the conversation. So, Jeff is a Bronx-born creative and marketing strategist and producer with over 10 years of experience across sports and news. He's also the founder of the Smartest Guys in the Room podcast, which is a platform that sets out to redefine what it means to be smart by celebrating creatives and change makers and the impact that they're having on communities across New York City. He's also the co-writer and voice behind lip-syncing comedic duo Juan Bago and O. Speaking of O, that's Oscar Martinez, who was also featured on this podcast a couple episodes ago. So if you heard that episode, just know that these are two out of the three hosts of the Smartest Guys in the Room podcast. One other note before getting into the episode, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice that we actually shot this at a coffee shop. I wanted to give a big shout out to 787 Coffee, who not only has delicious coffee, but they have around 15 different locations in New York City alone. It's a dope place to always work from, which is why I frequent the location so often. So if you're in New York City and looking for a place to work and or get some delicious coffee, I highly recommend 787 Coffee. We shoot a lot of our episodes there. Now that you have the context into this week's episode as well as our guest, let's get into this dope conversation. Let's start where we always start off with the word authenticity, right? So when you hear the word, what does it mean to you?
I think first and foremost, like living in truth, right? Like I think that if you are honest with yourself, then like the rest kind of follows. But I also think that authenticity is like one of those things, like it's like the saying, you can't know joy if you don't know sadness, right? So like you can't know authenticity until you feel in your heart, like, or you see something that's inauthentic. You kind of notice it. You don't put words to it, but you see that. You feel somebody being inauthentic, and like you feel maybe somebody not being genuine. So like I think by recognizing what doesn't feel authentic, you like kind of stumble into it, like a process of elimination almost. But like
I like that.
yeah, I think it's partially that, like you learn. It's all about like human kind of interaction and like emotional intelligence and learning that, I feel. And then you kind of start becoming more comfortable with like, because sometimes things are awkward, but at least they're honest and they're authentic, right? Like, and I think that you start kind of learning more about how to be comfortable in that space, so living in your truth. Right?
When's the first time you found yourself being inauthentic? Because you said it about like other people, but I'm sure it happened for you first.
Oh, absolutely, bro. Like I think early on in my career, you know, like I'm born and raised in the Bronx, right? So early on in my career, I was told like, yo, like the way I talk, you know, I was given like quote unquote constructive criticism about the way I talk, and like, you know, how I used to like stutter too much, and I used to like say, you know, my accent was too heavy, and like,
You have an accent?
Dike, right? Like at the time, supposedly.
What kind of accent? Like a New York accent?
Like a
what
Bronx,
do people?
yeah, like a Bronx accent. Like not necessarily like a Spanish accent, no, like a Bronx, like you sound kind of ghetto. Like without putting like the word out there, like it was basically that, like, yo, clean it up. Like you can have the cure for cancer and what you're reading, but nobody's gonna listen. And I was like, all right, well, I'll just go myself then.
Wow.
But you know, I think like again, starting and having these experiences where you're in spaces that you start to understand, oh, all right, like I don't belong here. Like I'm gonna try to find my actual nook, wherever that is, right? Like,
Yeah.
so like from that moment, you were at odds with yourself. And I think I'm pretty sure that everyone you've spoken to that is a person of color and comes from a marginalized background, they have some sort of mirrored experience where it's like, oh, I get it. Like your is standard. My thing is weird. Like whatever, like my quirk is, whatever, it's weird because I'm like brown or black or like I'm gay or whatever. Like I think that part is like what people start to feel like inauthentic, like when they can't fully be themselves and like, you know, finding yourselves in you were talking about this the other day, like about how you came out to your coworkers. That was hilarious because that's exactly how I was feeling. Like, yo, I don't watch Big Brother, son.
Wait, you came out to your coworkers like that?
I was like, there was a time that I had a whole bunch of coworkers who watched Big Brother and like they were like hard body into Big Brother.
Wait, Big Brother was like the kind of like the real world, but
yeah, like they have no outside communication.
Yeah, and they got the cameras on them.
Yes,
yeah.
They were obsessed. They would do pools and all that stuff, and I was like, bro, like I don't watch that, bro. Like I'm sorry, I don't know.
Wait, so you didn't even try?
I tried.
Oh, you tried? Okay,
like for like 2 weeks, and I signed up for this, and I was like, yo, I'm sorry, bro. Like this is the biggest waste of time. But I didn't want to knock, like, you know, because I probably had my own that they weren't into, right?
Of course.
Which they would let me know very quick, right? Like, but
Yo, isn't that funny though? Like I feel like we try so often to try to fit in, not to make ourselves comfortable, but to make other people feel comfortable.
Yeah,
exactly.
with us. Like, oh, don't worry. Like I understand you too. And like,
but
it was
go for it.
It was always that. It was always like. And I may be jumping around, but I had
it's cool. That's what a podcast is.
I had a mentor, and one time, it was later in my career, and I was just so tight because I found out, like I just found that there was a lot of times that I would be the one making the concession. I would be conceding. I would be like the one kind of going to a more passive position to make somebody else or to appease somebody. And I was like, well, like I was in a one-on-one with her. I was like, why do I always have to extend the olive branch?
Yeah.
She's like, bro, like, look at us. Like, look around. Like don't act like you just got here. Like, and it was kind of like a dose of reality for a second. Like, bro, like if you were just in this like a year, I would be giving you a different speech. But we've been in this for a long time. We've been in these spaces for a long time. You know very well why it is that you have to keep extending this olive branch, because the way that this is function is like if you speak up, which I have the story about that too. Like
we'll get into it. Yeah,
get too excited. It's like, whoa, like relax. Like you're getting a little bit like too riled up here. Like it's a little threatening, and like moments like that, bro. Like bro, I'm from New York.
But what do you mean speaking up? Like what is that?
Like
when you say that? Like you're in a meeting, you just say your opinion? I don't get it.
Yeah. So in a couple of instances, it was times where people would have like very aggressive positions towards me, but not my ideas. So like
tell me more. Aggressive positions. What do you mean?
Yeah, so like for example,
towards your ideas, you said?
Towards me, but not my ideas, right? So like you learn this by giving your idea to somebody else and let them take it to see how it plays out versus when you present certain ideas, right? So like this is a complaint that I had for a really long time that I was like, bro, I feel like I'm being like sandbagged, like my work, like people are making me feel like, and again, you have to do a litmus test to see like, all right, are people actually like treating you this way? Is this a perceived slight, right? Or is it like genuine? So it wasn't until I had more people that look like me working on what I do specifically. Because I worked in soccer, so like there was always like Latinos around, but like on my team specifically doing what I do, it wasn't until that team started to change that like people that were joining me on this team were like, oh no, yeah, they don't with you. Like it's very clear to me now. Like I see this, and that carried on for a good amount of time. So figuring out how to work around that, right, and like how to navigate a group that actively doesn't like prefer you as the face of whatever it is that they're working on with you. They want somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Not to say that was everybody. I want to clarify. Like there was people that loved me. I had great successes in a lot of places that I've been to, but those were like the formative moments, the moments that kind of taught you, all right, bro, like whatever you thought, like whatever assimilation you thought was going on, like whatever you thought you were kind of gonna achieve here, like in terms of like success, or like also relieving certain parts of yourself, like letting certain parts of yourself kind of go to the background to kind of appease somebody, like whatever you do, that's just not gonna happen. Like it's not gonna happen the way you think it is.
But what was the moment that you're alluding to where you sort of like spoke up or said something and you were met with that like, nah, bro, that's not, you're not doing that out here.
Let's see.
And maybe there were a few instances, but it sounds like you had a moment where you were just like, oh, like, nah, I can't do that.
Yeah, because I thought like, at first I was like, all right, is this something, okay, again, any rational person would ask themselves like, what am I doing, right?
And that happens, I think, maybe, and you tell me if it's wrong, but I
Yeah.
think that often happens because in these spaces, there aren't many people that look like us, right? So if something happens to us, we can't be like,
Yeah.
yo, am I bugging? Or like,
Yeah.
did that
I'm
happen?
telling you, it wasn't until I had a black boss that I
Exactly.
was like, all right, and like, that part was very instrumental, but also like a Dominican counterpart too.
Yeah.
And that part was, because she was in the trenches with me. Like,
Yeah.
you know, your VP can only be in
Right.
these
So many
battles
meetings. Right.
But like somebody who's next to you in the trenches, she's like, yo, bro, like I see it.
Exactly.
I see it.
You
So,
just
like,
want somebody to tell you that you're not crazy.
Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
want to be validated, and
Yes, validated.
I think that the part that was really like hurtful is mostly because I was always coming from a position of like compromise and trying to make it work. Like, and I would put a lot into my job. Like I would take it personally if I didn't do, like, if a project that I was working on didn't do well, and you know, I didn't really get this detachment that other people had just yet. Like I think I had to go through a few years of work experience to kind of get there, but I had my name on it, dude, so it had to be perfect. And it had to, like, if this didn't run this way, and I got relieved of that like notion very, very quickly. Like this is not it's not sustainable, because like there, in any space, not just work, but in any space, be it creative, be it like actual work, be it personal, like you're gonna have roadblocks, you're gonna have obstacles and barriers, unforeseen, right? That will kind of put a wrench in whatever you thought was gonna go on. But like having these moments helped me like detach myself from my job a little bit. But having, more specifically to your question earlier, like these instances where I was receiving like certain microaggressions when I would present certain concepts. So I don't want to say too much because I get into detail.
Yeah.
But
I get it.
It was one of these things where
Talk about generally, like you presented
so
an idea.
You pitch an idea. There's a big event that only happens every 4 years.
Sure,
up, right?
sure,
and, like,
sure.
You pitch some ideas around it, and it's like, like you get this like tepid response, but in your head you're like, wait, hold on, like I'm not saying like all my is great, but like
Sure.
these are all right ideas. Like let me run it by somebody else, right? Like let me go like just see. Hey, what do you think about this? Nah, these are solid. You should pitch them. Oh, already did. They were all rejected, right?
Yeah.
Give them to somebody else, like not on my team, you know, put them in their deck.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, that like just made it. It just, without any strife, without any edits,
Right.
like same thing that I had presented. So like that moment to me was like the glass shattering. I was like, oh, this is actually happening to me. Because most of the time too, when you're asking yourself these questions and you're reflecting, you're kind of in denial too.
Right.
Like, nah, nobody would be that whack.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
There's no way that people could be that whack. But yes, very possible. Like, so I think that, again, very sparsely kind of picking up these guides along the way, like these like inanimate guides that'll keep you on the right path, or like the better path for you.
How did that make you feel when you saw your idea get accepted, but it wasn't coming from you? I mean, I'm just thinking like you probably worked so hard to get to a point where you can work for a company and industry that you're just like, oh, this is dope. You're telling all your friends about it, and they're like, I would kill to be in your spot. Meanwhile, here you are struggling to even
and this is like just a creative part. There's I was also like a client facing, like
we'll get to that. Yeah.
So like,
but how did that feel though? Like you're seeing your idea, like you get to this point, but you're seeing your idea sort of like, and it's weird because your idea is an extension of you though. So in some ways, like you're not even being accepted, but it's just being translated through your idea.
Yeah, I think it was invalidating, right? Like one of the things
Probably made you not want to share it again.
Well,
or share less, maybe.
I think it was. I'm thankful for like my peers and the people that like that will hear me out and give me honest feedback. Like, you don't have to agree with my stuff, right? But like, I think it's more about the the blatant kind of like denial that something is good or not, right? Like, you know, that's a subjective measure, but like I think at the end of the day, it was that specific experience made me feel invalidating moving forward about sharing my work in corporate spaces to the extent that I was doing it. Like I was going all out with ideas. From that moment on, I was like, oh nah, like I'm gonna give you like just the prologue of this, like the you know the summary, the synopsis, if you will, and like the details come later, like and all this stuff, because it was just I didn't see the value in it, and I also was having a really hard time with that aspect, but also the client facing aspect and like the expectations of how, you know, things are supposed to kind of carry out in a dysfunctional organization, right? Like, so like you're working, you're trying to serve clients, you're trying to do all these things, but like meanwhile, like you ever seen that meme with the dog and the house is burning behind him? And he's like, everything's fine. Like this you on the phone with your clients, and like meanwhile, literally the world is burning behind you. And I think that I just had a really hard time balancing that and being like the best kind of strategist or the best marketer that I could be at the time. All that stuff kind of played into me becoming disillusioned, really. Like, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna find another job somewhere. I probably work at a hospital. Yeah. Like, no shade, but like, it was more like I want to do something that has nothing to do
completely
with
different
marketing or like anything like that.
What about how you showed up to client meetings? Were you? Yeah, like did you dress up how you dressed up now?
At first, I think when you first start, you don't have real equity to be like taking certain risks. That's just par for the course, I guess.
Sure.
Right, but like.
But you worked in like the sports industry.
Yeah.
So if I'm gonna work at like a gym, I'm gonna wear like gym clothes. Right?
At first,
I don't know.
The first year it was like semi-formal, like, you know, business back then business casual, right? Which is like chinos and like a button up type, you know, your bonobos, you gotta get those 34, 32, you know, like. But it was then kind of evolved into. Hey, we have this partnership with this athletic brand, Adidas, right? And it was like you could wear Adidas clothing, but I don't only wear Adidas, right?
So you can only wear Adidas clothing?
Yeah, at the time.
Really?
So it was like a very weird thing because
what year was that? Was it at the point where like
2016?
Oh yeah, Adidas wasn't popping. What was that? Shell toes?
There was like not Stan Smiths, bro.
Oh, Stan Smith.
And later on, like the NMDs and that stuff. But like, I think it was.
I'm not gonna lie, NMDs was kind of popping.
They were, but
the Ultra Boosts are comfortable. Yeah,
they
but still
were expensive as hell.
That
and
too.
Also, they were fly, but like at the time, if I had the choice to spend like my discretionary income, it wasn't gonna be on like mainly Adidas. Sure. And I think that was like the challenge. It was like, all right, well, sure, everybody could dress like kind of semi, like, you know, casual now, but it was like only Adidas. So it's like I have every Jordan, like from 1 through like whatever. So I would wear my. I'm like, all right, I would love to like have this conversation as to why, like, at that time we didn't have discounts for like employee discounts for Adidas. So you're mandating that we wear Adidas, and yet you're giving us like you're basically telling us how to spend our income.
And granted, the company you worked for is not Adidas, by the way.
No.
And also,
no.
It's not like you are Anthony Edwards and you're sponsored by Adidas.
Like legit, they took it this way.
It's just a partnership.
Everybody was an endorser. If you stepped in that building, you were an endorser of the Adidas brand. And like, it was just this like it was like an over kind of correction, or not even a correction, but like a over exaggeration of what it meant to be like true partners with a brand. Yeah. To the point where everybody was like, yo, all right, I'm over this. So that was like short lived. Because they would threaten to, like, they would be like, oh, you could just go back to wearing like business casual, and everybody's like, no, you already opened this box. Like, we're not going back. Like, I don't know where you're talking. Like, this is a real threat.
So it was like business casual or this. There's no in between.
Yeah, and then like I personally, because I didn't have enough Adidas. No, bro, I started wearing my Jordans, and like if you had something to say, it was like, am I meeting with clients today, or am I in my desk like not talking to anybody? Just a question. I don't mean to be rude, but like there's a million things more important than what you and I are currently speaking about right now. So why don't you go attend? I'll go attend to my important things, and you do the same. And like I think that that was like a formative moment for not just me. Like I think everybody that had that experience there, because it was like a weird purgatory time where people were being told how to dress without being kind of subsidized for it, if you will.
Did you ever buy some Adidas?
Oh yeah. I totally have, and I still do. Like, and you know,
But you did that because of the policy that was in place?
yes and no. Like at first, there's definitely like sneakers that I have that I probably would not have had.
Right.
But yeah, and like most of my workout gear, it was Adidas too, which like I actually prefer because they make really great workout gear. This is the thing, like nobody's saying that they don't with Adidas. It's like when you make us only with that brand, like we're gonna be like, all right, bro, this is like very, but like not to like be too much on that. But that was like one of those things too where your authenticity or like who you are, how you show up to work was kind of called into question too.
Yeah.
It's like you are wearing like you choose to wear nondescript clothing, right? So it's okay for you. That person's also wearing sneakers, but nobody told them because they didn't have a check, or they didn't. You get what I'm saying? So it's like very much, very, very subjective as to how they, or arbitrary as to how they implemented this stuff.
Interesting. I'm so curious. Like, growing up, were you also a bit of a people pleaser?
Oh yeah, yeah, man. Like that.
This idea of just like making others feel comfortable above your own comfort, like that was always a thing for you?
Yeah, I think ever since I was young, I think and I still hold this tenet today. One of the things that I've always longed for and will continue to long for is like belonging without compromise, right? And like earlier on in my life, I probably went about that there was compromise. There was a lot of, and I wasn't realizing I was like, oh no, I'm still being there was a lot of compromise and like how you show up to certain spaces, what you say around certain people, the jokes you make, like, you know, there's a lot of different like New Yorkers are very different than like people from out of state, and like the way we joke around is very different from people out of state. So like all that stuff gotta like, so I think that growing up and then going into the workplace, being somebody who was like palatable was a survival tactic for a really long time, because that's the only way I thought that I would get into these spaces.
Yeah. Where did you get that from though? Like, did somebody tell you had to be palatable?
I think it was more about like who I saw. I would have moments where I would be sitting waiting for interviews and stuff, and kind of like, I've had a couple like kind of like movies where you sitting around like y'all interviewing for the same job and like one guy's next to the other. I did that for a couple internships early on in college when I went to like the NBCs of the world. I had interviews there. And I saw it from an intern like level. I was like, all right, like there's a lot of white kids here, bro. Like there's a lot of like how like, you know, you start to kind of assess the landscape, and then like where you gonna sit? Right? Between this old white guy and that old white guy? Yeah. Like and that was like you kind of start at first it's subconscious, like, oh, like you like I feel like you're telling yourself subconsciously, oh, I gotta do that next time. Like I gotta wear this next time, or like I gotta say it like this.
But isn't that the fascinating thing though? You're sitting in those interviews, and you're just observing. You do an eye test, and it's not like anyone is telling you that. Like we tell ourselves these stories, and it's not like it's not backed up in data, blah blah blah. But it's true. Like we start telling ourselves that.
And like I think that, and not to get like too crazy on like semantics and also like politics of vocabulary and stuff, but like we view violence and aggression in a much different way than like the majority of like them white people, for example. And I think that you can see it in the workplace. Like you immediately come in and like all that I was just saying, like that's a hostile environment, and we're just like we're coming into it and we're feeling like our hackles are raised because we kind of feel like these things that are happening that don't like we can't put a name to it or come on like put our finger on it, but this place doesn't feel like I belong here exactly right now. Right. Like, and I think that like you say that and it's like, oh well, that's not violence. It's like no, but like hostile environments exist, right? Like, and I think that the inability to exist as you are in certain spaces is a hostile environment. I think that a lot of people of color, when they first start working, they can't verbalize that specific feeling, but I think that's what it is. Like I would always ask myself, like when I started working with the formal clothes, like, yo, why am I always sweating through like, bro? And I would have these like puddles of sweat that I would never have. And I'm like, oh, it's because like you are uncomfortable the whole day, son. Like you were wild, like nervous, and like the whole day, like being somebody else, sitting in a certain way in the meeting so that nobody like catching people looking at you to see what you're up to. Like it was very, very awkward at first, man. But
that's not where I thought you were gonna go with that.
Really?
Like when you said the whole suit thing, I thought you were just gonna be like, yeah, I'm hot, all these layers. You're
Oh,
like,
nah.
nah, man, psychologically.
Yeah, I think like it's just they create like I think these spaces are created to fit certain types of people, and
Yeah.
if you kind of are straddling like another, another type, then it's just it, you were the one who has to like adjust. The space doesn't adjust for anybody.
But like, if you're on these interviews and you're looking around, and you don't think that you'll belong here, right? Why? Why are you doing it?
Well, so here's the thing, like
Why did you want to go into these spaces?
when I started working, the intern interview, that I feel like I needed it. Like I needed to be an intern somewhere to be able to like get a job, right? Like that was was a path to like to getting a job at the time.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is the
Yeah.
idea
Well-
that the path is to get the
Yeah.
job. Whereas like, you also dabbled in a lot of other things, like you want to make music for a long time, right?
Yeah.
But it's this idea potentially around like, let me align myself to NBC. Because
Yeah.
like, I
This
work
is-
at NBC versus
is-
what do you do? Oh, I make music and people look at it a certain way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like I tell the story all the time how like when I was working at TikTok, I went into the T-Mobile store and Shorty was like, yo, you work at TikTok? And I was like, yeah, girl, you know what I mean? Yeah.
I'll be scrolling.
Yeah, but there's like a level of security that we probably get when we align ourselves to certain branding.
Yes. To a certain extent, absolutely.
I'm not saying you weren't into marketing or you weren't
No,
into that, but
it was more. But you're kind of right in the sense that like it wasn't necessarily about the name brand to like go and say that, but it was more about the name brand to like having something secure.
Yeah.
Right. And like I think that.
yeah, secure, yeah.
That's another. I
yeah,
bet you
yeah.
that's another hot button for anybody that you speak to. It's like
because it comes with the bag too, the
We're
security
coming
and
from-
the benefits and all that shit.
we're
you
coming
know?
from backgrounds where none of that existed, right? So
Yeah.
like I was that broke, bro. So when I started these jobs, I was like, all right, something more benefits. I need something. Did I really like? Was that what was my calling at the time? Probably not. I would have continued to make a million more Juan Bago No videos, right? But like that, it wasn't paying me, and like
Right.
B, it was like everything else around me felt like it was like, yo, all right, come on, man, you gotta go. And I felt like como tunneled, like that was a path that was like for me at the time.
Right.
Was it the only one? Probably not. Like it was the one that like when my eyes were open to at the time, that was the only path that I had. As I grew in these spaces, when I finally got to MLS and like I was working in soccer for a long time.
We can bleep that out if you want, by the way. Okay.
when I got there and like it was okay. It was fine. There was no. I think as you grow and as you experience more things and as you meet more people that aren't necessarily like the people that you like saw on day one, right? And like now you have this new boss and this boss is an asshole, right? Like what are you gonna do now, right? Like
Right.
all these things kind of became more formative experiences later on for me to go back and say, oh, yeah, maybe I should have thought about different paths, right? Like maybe I should have found a different way to roam because there's a million roads to roam.
Yeah, man. There's so many things that we do just based on
Perception,
having security,
yeah,
perception.
it's survival. Like
Yeah.
the decisions you make are and we on our show we had a guest on who's an educator and an author, and like he was talking about a lot of this stuff too. Like we are making decisions out of like necessity, whereas other people are making decisions out of comfort, like from a place of comfort. And it's like if this shit goes south, like you wouldn't believe how many times like I'm here like, yo, if this shit goes south, it's gonna be, and then, like the guy next to me is like, oh, go south, let's just move on to. I was like, all right, Mr. Moneybags, like,
right,
you know. And I think that was like again another like I think these are like little learnings along the way.
And it's crazy because like it's one of those like even if you don't got the money, you still operate from that mindset.
Yeah, you have to. I think.
Like right now, I don't got the most money in my savings account. Definitely dwindled down compared to when I quit. But I'm always thinking like, yeah, worst case scenario, I'll do X, Y, Z versus looking at my bank account and being like, I only got a couple months left. Like, let me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do think like even if we don't have it,
Do you think that's like
it's a mindset thing, yeah.
Do you think that's a learned like something that you now feel? Like would you have felt this way 10 years ago, or 5 years ago even?
Nah, I feel like that now because I have a delusional sense of confidence that I think I've built up just with my work experience. I just feel like I could get a job somewhere.
Yeah. And based on like now that you've kind of accomplished a lot, like right, like you.
Yeah. I mean, like worst case, and I don't need a job. I think it's also I've let go a lot of the ego that I was building towards.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to work for a big tech company in order to feel like good about
Absolutely.
myself. But there was a long time where I wanted that so
name on the
bad.
res.
Yeah,
I feel that.
just to do that. I don't even need to be making the same amount of money that I was making in my last job. Like, but for a long time, I needed to do that.
I feel that.
Yeah.
I think for my dream job for up until I was like 30, bro, was like I wanted to work at Nike. I wanted to lead like brand strategy.
Not Adidas?
Not Adidas, right? And that should even like, it was like, no, now you really gotta go work at Nike. But,
That's so funny.
But that was like my dream job, and like after a while, I realized like, oh, that shit might not happen right now, bro. Like let's figure out like how you can still be like creatively impactful and like still use a lot of these skills that you're gaining in other ways, right? And that's how my podcast came about with O. And just like, that's how these opportunities started creating themselves when I was like, all right, like instead of putting all 100% of like your creative and your strategic like insights or your mindset like into this role, how about you try something for yourself for a second and see how it goes? Like, and for the most part, pre-pandemic, if you told me to start a business, bro, or you told me to start any endeavor like on my own, I would be like, you are crazy.
Why?
You are crazy. Like I used to think that being an entrepreneur was like the most like psychotic thing that somebody could do. Like there's just
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it kind of is.
There's like no, it's not set up, and for a reason. Like it's
most people, I mean, most people fail.
And for a reason, like it's
I think you gotta be a little crazy to do it. Yeah,
a little bit,
in a good way. In a good way.
And like I think obsessive as well. Like I think that's kind of what flipped. Like, hey, the pandemic made everybody crazy. But I think that what came to me now is like, all right, if these opportunities aren't like coming the way that you want them to come, like you have to find your own you make your own opportunities. And I don't want to like get all like pick yourself up by the, that's not it. It's not, that's what I'm talking about. It's like more like, yo, they don't want to play, like create your own game, right? Like you start your own game and build it and they will come. And that's kind of like what we've been doing now. Like for a really long time, I wanted to do what I'm doing now for a company and like create something cool that impacts our communities and that has like a tangible takeaway. And for a long time, I wasn't able to do that. I was able to create really cool stuff and won a lot of cool awards for it, but like something that was like, oh, that's like my magnum opus, bro. Like, nah, like it never came about.
So are you, at this point, are you like, I don't want to say like disillusioned, but are you like, are you not optimistic about corporate? Like, is that something that it's something that you want to go back to?
I'm in, like, I feel like I'm in the same position as you. If it comes and if like however it comes, it just needs to work for me. But like, am I in the same space where I'm like, oh, like, I don't know, the North Face is calling, like a cool brand, like, okay, like, yeah, what's up? We can talk. But I'm not like in the same, like, oh, I gotta have this. Like, this is the end all be all, the make or break. Like, this is gonna like get me to where I need to be. That's not it. That's just a means to an end, right? But like what I'm doing now, working with my partners and like being creative, like that's the most fulfilling I've ever felt in my whole life. It's frustrating and like it you know, there's a lot of like obstacles and stuff, but it is the most rewarding thing that I've ever done for free.
Same. You know what's crazy? Like I don't remember last time I contributed to my savings account.
Bro.
But and I'm not even
lying, man.
Bro, I'm like making ends meet compared, like anything I make is just like going straight to bills essentially. And I couldn't be happier.
Yeah.
I could not be happier. I mean, would I like to be contributing to my savings account? Of course, right? But it's interesting that like the life experiences that we have, or maybe, you know, putting this back on you, it's kind of built maybe some sort of like healthy detachment to how you think about work, career, etc.
I thought it was what I like.
Like, and even if you go back to some sort of corporate job, maybe part two, maybe
it'll be a different experience for you where you don't feel the need to
Yeah.
people please, etc.
100.
I think that'll be an interesting thing.
You're absolutely right. My last, like, I was recently a part of a layoffs.
Yeah.
And with a news company, and that was a fine experience. Like like any other company, they had their own challenges, but I was in a different place where I could like manage the BS, right? And I also was in a like semi-leadership role where I had direct reports and like mentorship was part of it as well, right? So like that's kind of like where I'm finding my corporate fulfillment more recently, where it's like, all right, all this that you've learned for the past 10 years in this field, every time that I went through something, I always wished, like I mentioned, that I had somebody there that like understood until I did, right?
Right.
So how can I be that stopgap for people now, right? Like if you're early on in your career, like is there anything that I could tell you, is there anything that I could help you with that like will help you avoid some of these pitfalls that are unnecessary, right? Some are necessary. Like you need to hit some walls to be able to like get this level up. But like there are some things that are completely unavoidable and like they don't have to be that painful. And you know, I think that anybody entering the corporate space, it's a jungle, bro. Like it's a jungle. Like that's people think because everybody's walking around all like buttoned up, like nah, man, when money's on the line, dude, and when people are like closing big ass like numbers, bro. So I think that like you have to kind of prepare yourself one way or another for that. Like what better way than somebody like me or you that could like speak from tangible experience. Like, hey, so my next job now, like I'm actually starting I'm gonna be a career advisor at a university. So that's like the next step for me. And aside from keeping doing my creative stuff and like, you know, doing my consulting and stuff, like that's always gonna happen. But you know, career advising was another thing for students that I was like, all right, I think I could do this. And
I forgot about that. Yeah,
man. So
what? And it's, I think about back in my college days, the advice that I received was, in some ways, like saying it without saying it, they told me like, make sure to assimilate before you start working that internship. You know what I mean? Essentially, that's what they told me. Like I remember them putting up a picture of like, this is how to show up, this is not how to show up, and this look like me.
Yeah.
You feel me? Like
classic.
Like what's the one thing that you kind of like
classic.
What's the one thing that you know, I'm sure there's various things that you want to teach these students, but like what's one thing that you wish you were told at that age going into it?
That is, it's all right, like that it's okay that you don't have the same common interests as a majority of your peers or your coworkers in that space, because I think that that's where like it's so innocuous in the grander scheme of things, like it doesn't really mean anything. But when you come in and you want to like talk about something that you saw last night, and nobody knows like whatever, like nobody's watching Insecure, nobody's watching like Snowfall, right? Like I think that you have to it sucks, but use it as a point to talk about it, but don't feel like you have to kind of dim it down because you're the only one that is talking about this stuff. No, you're talking about it because it's your interest, right? So I think that part is one, and that I'm using a very like remedial example, but like that goes for like literally everything. If you even when it comes to problem solving as well, and like I'm sure you've seen this young lady on TikTok that she imitates like a corporate like HR like lady, right? You see it? Yeah. Like sometimes, like in my last job is a perfect example. I had a direct report who was like so attuned, but she didn't know how to call it out necessarily. But she was so attuned. She was like, "Was it just me, or that like was that just a whole bunch of?" I was like, "Yeah, that was just corporate jargon for like you not getting a raise, bro." Like that's what. And I think that if I can be there to like translate for some people sometimes, like I could translate Dominican Spanish, but I could also translate corporate English as well. Like I think that's more than enough. And then looking ahead, you utilizing like the things that you do on the side, you don't have to like fully monetize these things. I think that's another thing. I would keep something for yourself. That's a very new opinion of mine, but like there's some things you just like, not everything is a commodity. And like I think that sometimes we begin to feel like commodities if we just try to monetize everything that we do, right? Nothing against making money, bro. Like I love making good money, but like I think keeping yourself grounded, that's one way that could help like navigate this process as a young person.
I love that. We could probably end it
As
there.
a young person, we're not young. We're young. We're very young, actually.
I think one of the things that helped you during your career is this idea of just like having people around you that look like you, right? People use a word like community,
Yeah.
right? That's what's so dope about the work that you do these days is highlighting people that are building community locally, right?
100%.
Like,
that's a big one. You know, having that connection back home, like wherever home is, and it doesn't even have to be your home. It's just like you treat it as such, right? Like, so whatever that is for you, that community aspect, leaning into that and fortifying it, especially now, bro, where like, you know, finding community outside of work, outside of like your friends from a long time, it's so hard, bro.
Yeah.
Like it's extremely hard. So
and we I feel like I've grown out of so many friends.
yes,
Like some
it
of our
feels
early
that way
some
sometimes.
of our early friends are just based on proximity.
Yeah.
It's like we're just friends because I
Convenience.
went to school and we live 2 blocks away from
Yeah.
each other. It's not because we shared interests.
Yes.
As you get older, I think it's really important to build community or find people that have similar interests to you.
Yes, 100%. And like I think that starts to happen when you start vocalizing a lot of these things. So another thing next, aside from the community, or you know, in addition to the community aspect, is the fact that like, you know, being in these spaces and seeing people who were like sharp in very different ways and like very, very attuned, very intelligent in like ways that may not have been applicable to that particular role, that like, but just seeing different types of intelligence has always kind of sparked my like, or inspired me to kind of explore that a little bit. So combining the community stuff,
It's all good. It's all good.
combining the community stuff with, you know, with that point of view, you know, I netted out with the smartest guys in the room, and it essentially is like, yo, there's so many different ways that you can be brilliant and that you can impact your community, right?
Yeah.
So let's redefine what it means to be smart. Let's not think of like a financial like analyst or a computer programmer, a computer engineer or something like that. Like that's one excellent way to like, you know, showcase your intelligence, but there's so many different ways. We want to continue to tell those stories, me and my partner Oscar and Big Just, but that is the main inspiration. It's like, how do we tap into our community? How do we tell stories that you are longing to hear, that you didn't know you probably wanted to hear, or like, how do we bring those stories to you? How do we let you know that these things are happening in your backyard, right?
Yeah.
Like, also, how can we inspire you to find whatever it is that makes you brilliant and go do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to change the world, but like, as long as you can like change something material and that will better your life, I think that's more than enough for us, right?
I think you're also raising awareness for communities or programs or groups that people can join.
Yeah.
Like in doing research for the app that I'm building, I was asking people like, what communities are you part of? You know, and people said, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
And some people were like, 0.
Yeah.
Like people just have their friend groups, but again, like early on, that's just based on proximity.
Yeah.
So the older you get, like you and I probably have more in common than like some of my best friends growing up.
I bet.
You know what I mean?
bet, yes.
Which is interesting, but you like.
We got the same birthday.
Oh yeah, and Cardi B.
And Cardi B.
Yeah, but that's really interesting. Like, yeah, like even like I'm a runner, and I heard about Root Crew for a while, but I didn't know the founder.
Yeah.
And like tuning into your show, I was like, oh, there's a running community.
Yeah.
And they're uptown, and they're by me. That's something I could
Yeah.
join if I really wanted to.
Yeah,
And I could meet like-minded people that are in there. I could probably meet Bay in there. Who knows?
Exactly, bro. And that's part of it. It's like every episode there was a new community kind of being brought into the forefront, from the wine and sommelier community,
Yeah.
the coffee entrepreneur,
Yeah.
also coffee shop entrepreneur. Like,
Right.
we did both angles. We had educators, authors. Like, we want to tell all these kinds of stories again, because how these things materialize for you is like the ultimate goal. Like having new, and also, sorry to backtrack, but like artists as well. I think an artist is the easiest way to kind of see what I'm getting at, but it shows up in every industry. There's change makers in every industry. There's people who love like breaking, right? And not in like some like startup founder type thing, more like decolonizing, bro. Like, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, there are people here that have really, really profound ideas and really, really, really passionate aspirations. Like, how can we be just a vehicle to get you from A to B? We don't even gotta get you to Z, bro. Like, how can we just progress your mission?
Yeah.
So if we can be the space and we can be the mouthpiece for those folks, then I'm more than pleased with that, for sure.
I love that, man.
Mi gente, that wraps up another episode of the Quién, Eres podcast. Hey, if you enjoyed what you heard, please do us a favor. Wherever you're listening, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, leave a rating and a review. It's just going to help ensure that these stories and experiences get heard by as many people as possible. And that's the only way that we're going to redefine professionalism. Thank you, and see you next time.